At dawn, 100 riders appeared on the ridge. Jasper stood in his doorway, coffee cup trembling in his weathered hands, watching an impossible sight unfold across the valley. They came in silence, warriors on horseback, their figures dark against the pale morning sky. They moved with a purpose that made his chest tighten with fear. Yesterday, he had been a man with nothing. Today, an army waited for him. He squinted, trying to make sense of it. The riders weren't advancing. They were just there, as if they had materialized from the earth itself. Their horses stood perfectly still, breath pluming in the cold air, an otherworldly scene that defied all logic. Jasper's mind raced back to the day before, to the moment that changed everything. The single crumpled dollar bill still sat on his kitchen table, a reminder of what might have been the worst or best decision of his life. But how could selling his last horse to an Apache elder for pocket change possibly connect to this? The lead rider raised something in the air, not a weapon, an object Jasper couldn't quite identify. It caught the first rays of sunlight, gleaming like a signal. His horse, Thunder, was gone. His money was gone. His pride had been shattered into pieces smaller than desert sand. Yet somehow these 100 souls had come for him. The riders began to move, not toward his cabin, but into a perfect formation, a circle around his property. They were close enough now that he could see the intricate patterns on their clothing, the careful way they held their reins, the respect in their posture. Jasper stepped onto his porch, bare feet touching the cold wood. He felt the weight of something much larger than his own understanding pressing down on him. The elderly woman's words from yesterday echoed in his mind. Some things are worth more than their price. He had thought she was talking about his horse. Now, staring at a scene that belonged in a dream, Jasper realized he might have been wrong about everything. The hunger in Jasper's stomach had been a constant companion for 3 weeks. He stood in the doorway of his small cabin, watching Thunder graze in the fenced area that had once held a dozen horses. Now only one remained, the last connection to everything he had lost. His hands shook as he counted the coins in his pocket for the third time that morning. 47 cents. Not enough for a loaf of bread, let alone the feed Thunder needed to survive another week. The bank notice crumpled in his other pocket felt like a death sentence. Final payment due? 7 days. Jasper had built this ranch from nothing, working sunrise to sunset for 15 years. The drought had killed his crops. Disease had taken his cattle. Debts had consumed his savings like wildfire. Now creditors circled like vultures, and the only thing standing between him and complete ruin was the decision he'd been avoiding for days. He walked slowly toward Thunder, his boots heavy on the dusty ground. The chestnut stallion lifted his head, dark eyes meeting Jasper's with a trust that made this moment feel like betrayal. Thunder had carried him through storms, across dangerous terrain. He had been his only companion through the loneliness that followed his wife's death 2 years ago. "I'm sorry, old friend," Jasper whispered, running his hand along Thunder's neck. The horse nuzzled against his shoulder, unaware that this might be their last morning together. The sound of approaching hooves made Jasper look up. An elderly Apache woman rode toward his property on a paint horse. Her weathered face was set with quiet dignity. Something about her presence commanded respect. She stopped at his fence line and dismounted with surprising grace. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of wisdom. "I hear you have a horse for sale." Jasper's throat tightened. Word traveled fast, especially when desperation drove a man to post a notice at the general store. "Yes, ma'am. He's a good horse. Strong, well-trained." The woman approached the fence, studying Thunder with expert eyes. She ran her hands along his legs, checked his teeth, examined his hooves with the thoroughness of someone who understood horses deeply. Thunder stood calmly, sensing her respectful intention. "How much?" she asked simply. Jasper had practiced this moment, but the words still came hard. $300. It was far less than Thunder was worth, but desperation had taught him to be realistic. The woman nodded slowly. Then she reached into a small leather pouch at her waist. She pulled out a single wrinkled dollar bill and held it toward him. "This is what I can offer." The words hit Jasper like a physical blow. $1. For Thunder. for his last hope, his final treasure, his most loyal companion. His first instinct was anger. How dare she insult him with such an offer? But something in her eyes stopped him. He saw not mockery, but a deep sadness that seemed to mirror his own. Her hands were calloused from hard work, her clothes mended in several places. She was no wealthier than he was. "Ma'am, he began, but she raised her hand gently. "I know what you're thinking, but sometimes the value of something can't be measured in money. Sometimes it's measured in need." Jasper stared at the dollar bill, his mind racing. $1 wouldn't save his ranch. It wouldn't buy him food or pay his debts. It would change nothing about his desperate situation. But as he looked into the woman's eyes, he saw something he recognized. The same quiet desperation he felt every morning. He understood this moment was about more than money. The question that would haunt him was simple. What kind of man was he willing to be when everything else was stripped away? Jasper took the dollar bill with trembling fingers. The paper felt impossibly light for something that represented the end of everything. Around them, the morning air carried the scent of sage. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why do you need him?" The woman, who introduced herself as Ayana, looked toward the horizon. Her expression held years of stories, most of them carved with pain. "My grandson," she said quietly. "He has been sick for many months. The medicine man says his spirit is broken, not his body. He won't eat, won't speak, won't leave his bed." She paused, her hand resting on the fence post. "But he asks for one thing every day, to see horses run free across the valley, like his grandfather used to tell him in stories. Our horses died in the harsh winter," she continued. "Disease took the rest. I saved this dollar from selling beadwork in town, hoping to find someone who might understand that some things matter more than their price." Jasper felt something shift inside him. He had been so focused on his own loss, he hadn't considered someone else might be facing a deeper kind of poverty, the poverty of hope. "How old is your grandson?" "8 years old. His name is Koa." Ayana's voice softened. "He believes that if he can see horses run free again, he will remember how to be strong. Children believe in such things." Thunder whinnied softly behind them, as if sensing the weight of the conversation. Jasper turned to look at his horse, seeing him now not just as his last possession, but as something that might restore life to a dying child. The rational part of his mind screamed against it. $1 would not save his ranch. He would still lose everything, and he would lose it for nothing. But as he looked at Ayana's face, he remembered why he had built this ranch in the first place. He had come here believing that hard work and honest living could create something meaningful. Maybe he had forgotten that healing wasn't always about saving yourself. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "if I give you Thunder, what happens to him?" "He will run with my grandson. They will ride across the valley every morning until Koa remembers what it feels like to be alive. And when that day comes, Thunder will know he served a greater purpose than being owned." Jasper closed his eyes, feeling the morning sun warm his face. When he opened them again, his decision was made. Not by logic, but by something deeper he had almost forgotten he possessed. "Take him," he said, holding out the halter rope. "Take Thunder." Ayana studied his face, searching for doubt or regret. Finding neither, she accepted the rope with the reverence of someone receiving a sacred trust. "You understand," she said, "that this trade cannot be measured by the standards men usually use." "I'm beginning to understand that," Jasper replied. As Ayana led Thunder away, the horse turned to look back at Jasper one last time. Instead of betrayal, Jasper saw something like gratitude in those dark eyes, as if Thunder somehow knew he was going where he was needed most. Standing alone in his empty corral, Jasper felt something unexpected. Not the crushing weight of loss, but a strange lightness. For the first time in months, he had made a decision based not on fear, but on faith. He didn't yet know that his choice would echo far beyond this moment, or that by sunset, word of what had happened would travel through both the town and the tribal lands like wildfire. The question was no longer what he had lost, but what he had set in motion. By midday, the story had reached every corner of Millfield. Jasper walked through town with a single dollar in his pocket, acutely aware of the stares and whispered conversations that followed him like shadows. At the general store, conversation stopped when he entered. "Is it true?" asked Martha Henley, the store owner, as Jasper counted out coins for a small bag of beans. Did you really sell Thunder for $1? Jasper nodded, feeling heat rise in his cheeks. Yes, ma'am. But why? That horse was worth 10 times what you needed to save your ranch. The question hung in the air. Jasper realized he couldn't explain his decision in a way that would make sense to people who measured everything by profit and loss. Sometimes, he said quietly, you do what feels right, not what makes sense. Martha shook her head, but not unkindly. Jasper, that's noble and all, but noble doesn't pay debts. What are you going to do now? Before he could answer, the store door burst open with such force the bell above it nearly broke. Tom Bradley, one of the wealthiest ranchers in the territory, stood in the doorway, rage written across his face. You fool! Bradley shouted, pointing an accusing finger at Jasper. Do you have any idea what you've done? The store fell silent. Bradley stepped forward, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. That Apache woman, Bradley continued, his voice dripping with contempt. She came to my ranch an hour ago with your horse. Wanted to know if she could let the boy ride across my land. My land, Jasper. Like she had some kind of right to it. Jasper's stomach tightened. He had given Thunder to Ayana, trusting it would work out. He hadn't considered that other people wouldn't share his faith. What did you tell her? Jasper asked. I told her to get off my property before I called the sheriff. Indians don't have any business on my land, and that horse of yours sure doesn't either. Bradley's eyes narrowed. But that's not the worst part. He paused for dramatic effect. She told me this ridiculous story about how you gave her that horse out of kindness. How you're some kind of saint who cares more about a sick Indian boy than your own survival. And now that story is spreading through the tribal lands like wildfire. Jasper felt the blood drain from his face. What do you mean? I mean, Bradley said with a cruel smile, that half the Apache families in the territory think you're some kind of hero. They're talking about you like you're the first white man in 50 years who showed them genuine respect. Martha gasped softly. Other customers began murmuring. Jasper realized that what he had seen as a simple act of compassion was being interpreted as something much larger and much more dangerous. Bradley leaned closer, his voice a menacing whisper. You've got every Indian in 3 valleys thinking that white folks might actually give a damn about them. Do you understand what kind of problems that creates? Jasper's mind raced. He had sold his horse to help a sick child. Now that simple act was being twisted into something that threatened the careful balance of mistrust that people like Bradley preferred to maintain. I didn't mean, Jasper began. I don't care what you meant, Bradley interrupted. I care about what happens next. Because if those Indians start expecting kindness from all of us, it's going to upset the way things work around here. As Bradley stormed out, Jasper realized his choice had consequences, reaching far beyond anything he could have imagined. The question now was whether those consequences would destroy more than just his own life. The sun was setting when Jasper returned to his empty ranch. The silence felt different now, heavier, like the air before a storm. He sat on his porch, holding the crumpled dollar bill, wondering if he had made the biggest mistake of his life. The sound of approaching horses made him look up. 3 riders emerged from the dusty trail, their silhouettes dark against the orange sky. As they drew closer, Jasper recognized them as men who worked for Tom Bradley. Rough hands who handled problems their boss preferred not to discuss. The lead rider, a scarred man named Collins, dismounted and approached the porch. His companions remained on their horses, hands resting casually near their weapons. Evening, Jasper, Collins said, his voice carrying a false friendliness that made Jasper's skin crawl. Mr. Bradley sent us to have a conversation with you. About what? About the consequences of your charitable nature. Collins smiled, but it held no warmth. See, your little gesture today has stirred up some feelings in the tribal lands. Feelings that might lead to expectations. Expectations that could cause problems for everyone. Jasper stood slowly, his hand moving instinctively toward the rifle that hung just inside his door. I sold a horse to someone who needed it. That's not a crime. No, Collins agreed, but it's foolish. And foolishness can be dangerous when it affects other people's business. One of the mounted men spoke up. his voice harsh. Word is that half the Apache families are talking about you like you're some kind of friend to their people. That's not good for the natural order of things. Collins nodded. Mr. Bradley has worked hard to maintain an understanding between the white settlers and the tribal folks. That understanding depends on everyone knowing their place. Your little act of kindness threatens to upset that balance. Jasper felt anger building. So I'm supposed to let a child suffer to maintain Tom Bradley's idea of natural order? You're supposed to think about consequences before you act, Collins replied. But since you didn't, we're here to help you fix the situation. How? Collins reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch that clinked with the sound of coins. Mr. Bradley is prepared to pay you fair value for that horse. $300. All you have to do is go to the tribal lands tomorrow. Tell that Apache elder you've changed your mind and take the horse back. The offer hung in the air like smoke. $300 would save Jasper's ranch, pay his debts, give him a fresh start. All he had to do was betray the trust of a desperate grandmother and destroy the hope of a sick child. And if I refuse? Colin's smile disappeared entirely. Then you'll discover that there are other ways to solve problems. Ways that don't involve money or conversation. Jasper looked at the three men, understanding perfectly. His choice was simple. Take the money and crush a child's hope, or refuse and face whatever Bradley was prepared to inflict. I need time to think about it, Jasper said carefully. You have until tomorrow at sunset, Collins replied, remounting his horse. Make the right choice, Jasper, for everyone's sake. As the riders disappeared into the darkness, Jasper sank back onto his porch steps. The dollar bill in his pocket felt heavier now. He had thought selling Thunder was the hardest decision he would face. Now he realized it was only the beginning. Tomorrow he would have to choose between saving himself and protecting the faith a child had placed in the idea that a white man could be trustworthy. The question that kept him awake through the long night was whether he had the courage to honor that trust, even if it cost him everything he had left. Somewhere in the darkness he could hear the distant sound of drums carrying across the valley, a sound that seemed to be calling him toward a destiny he couldn't yet comprehend. Dawn broke gray and cold. Jasper had not slept. He sat on his porch watching the horizon, thinking about the choice that would define his life. The deadline Collins had given him felt like a noose tightening with each passing hour. The sound of hoofbeats made him look up, expecting to see Bradley's men returning early. Instead, he saw a sight that made his heart nearly stop. Ayanna rode toward his ranch on Thunder, but she was not alone. Behind her, a small boy sat upright in the saddle, his thin arms wrapped around her waist. Even from a distance, Jasper could see the child's face held something it had not possessed in months. Hope. They stopped at his fence line, and Ayanna helped the boy dismount. The child moved slowly, but he walked on his own toward the fence where Jasper stood. His dark eyes were bright with life. This is Koa, Ayanna said simply. He wanted to thank you. The boy stepped forward, his voice barely a whisper. Mister, your horse taught me how to feel strong again. Jasper knelt to the boy's eye level, feeling something break apart inside his chest. How did he do that? Koa's face lit up with a smile. When we rode across the valley this morning, Thunder ran like the wind. Grandmother said that when horses run free, they carry the spirits of everyone who believes in them. Thunder carried my spirit back to me. Ayanna placed a hand on her grandson's shoulder. Koa has eaten 2 full meals since yesterday. He slept through the night without bad dreams. This morning he asked to come here, to meet the man who gave him back his life. Jasper felt tears threatening to spill from his eyes. In front of him stood living proof that his decision had been right, regardless of what it cost him. This child was alive again because of Thunder, because of $1, because of a choice made with faith instead of fear. I'm glad Thunder could help you, Jasper said to Koa. He's a special horse. Are you really going to take him back? Koa asked suddenly, his voice small and worried. Jasper's blood turned to ice. What do you mean? Ayanna's expression darkened. Word has reached our people that men came to your ranch last night, that they offered you money to undo what you did. Is this true? Jasper looked at the boy's face, seeing fear creeping back into eyes that had just begun to shine with life. He thought about the $300, about his ranch, about his debts. He thought about Collins and his threats, about Bradley's anger. Then he thought about what kind of man he wanted to be. No, he said firmly, looking directly into Koa's eyes. I'm not taking Thunder back. He belongs with you now. The relief that flooded the boy's face was worth more than all the money in the territory. Ayana nodded slowly, respect and gratitude in her weathered features. There is something else you should know, she said quietly. Our people have been talking about what you did, about the kind of man who would give his last possession to help a stranger's child. Word has spread to other tribes. What kind of word? Ayana's eyes held a weight of significance that made Jasper's chest tighten. The kind of word that changes how people see the future, she said. Be ready, Jasper Wild. What you set in motion with $1 is about to come full circle. The afternoon sun hung high and merciless when Collins and his men returned. This time they brought reinforcements. 6 riders total, all armed, all wearing expressions that promised violence. Jasper watched them approach from his porch, his rifle within reach, his hands steady. Collins dismounted, his eyes scanning the property. Finding no sign that Jasper had changed his mind, his face hardened. Well, Collins asked, have you made your decision? I have, Jasper replied, standing. Thunder stays where he is. The silence that followed felt like the moment before lightning strikes. Collins smiled, the smile of a predator cornering its prey. That's unfortunate. Mr. Bradley was hoping you'd see reason. I see it fine. I see a sick child who's getting better because of kindness. I see an old woman who trusted me. I see that some things matter more than money. One of the mounted men laughed harshly. You see fairy tales, old man. We see problems that need solving. Collins raised his hand for silence. Jasper, you're making this harder than it needs to be. We're prepared to offer you $400 now. Take the money, get the horse, and everyone walks away happy. No. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Collins's false smile disappeared. Then you've chosen the hard way. He signaled to his men, who began dismounting, spreading out to surround the cabin. We'll take the horse ourselves and leave you to explain to your Apache friends why you couldn't protect their trust. Jasper's hand moved toward his rifle, but he knew the math. 6 armed men against 1. Even if he fought, they would still take Thunder. Koa would lose his hope. Ayana's faith would be shattered. You don't understand, Jasper said desperately. That boy was dying. His spirit. Thunder gave him back his will to live. That's not our problem, Collins replied. Our problem is maintaining order. Your problem is that you forgot your place. Suddenly, the sound of approaching hooves made everyone turn. A single rider was coming fast, dust rising behind him like a brown cloud. As he drew closer, Jasper recognized him as Samuel Wright, a rancher from the next valley over. Wright pulled his horse to a sliding stop. Collins, Wright called out, his face flushed. You need to see what's happening on the ridge. What are you talking about? Wright pointed toward the eastern horizon. Riders. More riders than I've ever seen in one place. They're coming this way. Collins squinted against the sun. How many? I stopped counting at 50, but there's more. A lot more. Wright's voice carried a mixture of fear and wonder. They're not coming fast. They're coming steady, like they have all the time in the world. Jasper felt his heart begin to race. Who are they? Apache families, from every tribe in 3 territories. Men, women, elders, young warriors, all of them riding toward this ranch like they're coming to something important. Collins' face went pale. That's impossible. Indians don't organize like that. They don't move in groups that large unless they're going to war. Wright shook his head. This isn't war. I got close enough to see their faces. They're not coming to fight. They're coming to honor something. As if summoned by his words, the first riders appeared on the ridge. Distant figures silhouetted against the sky, moving with the patience of people who knew their purpose. Collins looked from the approaching riders to Jasper, understanding beginning to dawn in his eyes. What did you do? He whispered. Jasper stared at the horizon, watching more and more riders appear on the ridge. He was about to discover the true weight of selling his last horse for $1. They came down from the ridge like a river of honor, flowing toward redemption. Jasper stood transfixed as rider after rider appeared. Men and women of all ages, some carrying children, others leading extra horses. The sound of so many hooves created a rhythm like distant thunder that made the very ground pulse with life. Collins and his men backed toward their horses, hands hovering near their weapons, clearly uncertain. This was not a war party. There were too many elders, too many families. But it was something powerful enough to make hardened men question everything. There have to be 100 of them, Wright whispered in awe. As the riders drew closer, Jasper could see their careful organization. They moved in formation, with respected elders at the front, families in the middle, and young warriors at the rear. Each group carried items: blankets, pottery, beadwork, tools. They were bringing gifts. Leading them all was an elderly man whose bearing commanded immediate respect. His hair was white as winter clouds, his face carved with the lines of wisdom. When he raised his hand, the entire procession stopped as one, creating a semicircle around Jasper's property that stretched from one horizon to the other. The silence that followed was so complete Jasper could hear his own heartbeat. The elderly leader dismounted and walked slowly toward the fence. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly across the valley. "You are Jasper Wild." It was not a question. "Yes, sir. I am Chief Running Bear. I have come to speak with the man who sold his last horse for $1 to heal a dying child." Collins stepped forward, his face flushed with anger and confusion. "Now wait just a minute. This is private property, and you people have no right—" Chief Running Bear turned to look at Collins with eyes that had seen generations rise and fall. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. "You are not part of this conversation." The simple statement contained such power that Collins actually took a step backward. The chief returned his attention to Jasper. "For 2 days, runners have carried word across the territory about what you did. How you gave away your most valuable possession to help a stranger's child. How you chose kindness over survival, honor over profit." Jasper felt his throat tighten. "I just did what felt right." "What felt right," the chief repeated, nodding slowly. "Many men know what is right. Few choose it when the cost is everything they have." Behind the chief, more riders were dismounting. Jasper could see Ayana among them, with young Koa sitting proudly on Thunder. The boy's face glowed with health. Chief Running Bear reached into a leather pouch and withdrew something that caught the sunlight, a silver medallion on a leather cord, carved with intricate symbols. "This belonged to my grandfather," the chief said, holding it toward Jasper. "It was given to him by a white cavalry officer who chose to save Apache children during a terrible winter, even though it cost him his career. For 50 years, we have waited to find another white man worthy of wearing it." The weight of what was happening began to settle on Jasper. This was not just about Thunder or Koa. This was about the possibility that people from different worlds could choose to see each other's humanity. "I can't accept this," Jasper said. "I only did what anyone should have done." Chief Running Bear smiled. "That," the chief said, "is exactly why you are the one who must accept it." Chief Running Bear placed the medallion around Jasper's neck. As the leather cord settled against his chest, every rider in the valley dismounted as one and stood in respectful silence. The gesture was so powerful that even Collins and his men removed their hats without thinking. "This is not just a gift," the chief said, his voice carrying across the silent valley. "This is a promise. You showed faith in our people when others showed only suspicion. You chose compassion when others chose profit. For this, you will never walk alone." As if on an invisible signal, the assembled families began moving forward. Each group carried something: food, blankets, tools, supplies. They placed these gifts in neat piles near Jasper's cabin, creating a small mountain of provisions. An elderly woman approached, carrying a leather pouch heavy with coins. "From families across 3 tribes," she said simply, pressing it into Jasper's hands. "Payment for teaching us that kindness still exists in this world." Jasper opened the pouch and nearly staggered. There had to be more than $1,000 inside, enough to save his ranch, pay his debts, and start over with dignity. "I cannot accept this," he protested. "I didn't help Koa for money." "Which is exactly why you have earned it," Chief Running Bear replied. "A man who does good for reward is merely a merchant. A man who does good despite cost is a brother." Koa broke free from the crowd and ran to Jasper. throwing his small arms around the man's waist. "Thank you for giving me thunder," the boy whispered. "Thank you for helping me remember how to be strong." Jasper knelt down and looked into the child's bright, healthy eyes. "Thank you for reminding me why being strong matters." The sound of approaching horses made everyone turn. Tom Bradley rode toward them with a dozen armed men, his face dark with rage. He pulled his horse to a stop at the edge of the gathering. "What is the meaning of this?" Bradley shouted. "This is my territory, and I won't have it overrun by—" Chief Running Bear stepped forward, and something in his presence made Bradley's words die in his throat. "This land belongs to all who treat it with respect," the chief said calmly. "Today we honor a man who understands that truth. Tomorrow we will remember who stood with him and who stood against him." Bradley looked around at the 100 mounted warriors, at the families, at the children, and seemed to understand that his influence had limits. Some things were bigger than his ranch or his money. Collins and his men were already backing toward their horses, recognizing this situation had moved far beyond their control. As the sun began to set, the Apache families prepared to leave. But before they mounted, Chief Running Bear had one final gift. "You gave away your last horse to heal a child," the chief said, gesturing toward their horse herd. "Choose any horse from our people as your own. Choose well, for this horse will carry you into a future where you will never face hardship alone." Jasper looked across the magnificent animals and realized everything had changed. He was no longer a failed rancher facing ruin. He was a man who had discovered that honor was worth more than gold, that kindness created bonds stronger than debt, and that sometimes losing everything was the only way to find what truly mattered. As darkness fell and the Apache families rode back across the valley, Jasper stood in front of his cabin. He wore a medallion of honor, surrounded by gifts that would sustain him for years, mounted on a horse that represented the trust of an entire people. He had sold his last horse for $1 and in return had become rich in every way that truly mattered. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale from the frontier, where courage and honor collide in ways you never expected. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.